Chapter 4, Finding Quintus. Ranger wanted to run, but he had to be careful. He couldn't lose Quintus's scent. He patted down one of the shadowy passages, sniffing the dusty stone. Quintus had come this way for sure. Ranger kept his nose to the ground where the scent was the easiest to find. There were so many other smells filling the air. Animal smells, big cats, lots of them, and other animals that Ranger didn't recognize. Smoke from a faraway fire, and men, so many men. They were everywhere in these underground passages. They were muscular and sweating, carrying supplies and working machinery. But none of them knew where Quintus. Where was he? Ranger could still smell the scent trail through the air, but before he followed it much farther, Ranger had to go to the bathroom. He usually liked to go on a tree, but this didn't seem like the kind of place where trees would grow. Maybe he'd find a gate that led outside. Ranger followed the gladiator's scent to the other passageway. Here, filthy men in tunics were tying ropes. Others were holding wooden bars that stuck out from the posts that were from the floor to the ceiling. Besides them was a wooden platform with trees growing on it. Trees! Ranger started towards them and picked out a tree. It didn't smell quite right. It didn't look right either. Most trees grew out of dirt and not wood, but a strange tree was better than no tree at all. He trotted up to it and lifted his hind leg. But before he could finish, one of the men shouted and grabbed for Ranger's collar. Ranger tugged away from him. Then the men holding the wooden bars started pushing them round in a circle. The center post turned. Ropes wound around it, and Ranger felt the platform rising under his paws. He was being lifted, along with the not quite right trees, toward a hole in the ceiling. One of the men called out an order. The others pushed harder on the wooden bars, and the lifting machine creaked, and Ranger rose higher above the stone floor, closer to the ceiling. The roar of people echoed through the hole. The lifting machine was raising the trees up to another level of the amphitheater. Ranger did not want to go back to the blood-smelling sand. Where do you think he's going? He did not want to go back to the noisy crowd. He had to find Quintus so he could go home. The rope men grunted and tugged. Ranger was being lifted higher and higher above the stone floor. He would have to jump. Ranger found a space between two men and leaped from the platform. He heard another shout. Someone grabbed him by his tail as he ran. When Ranger was away from the men and the lifting machine, he sat down and licked his paw. He scratched at it on the hard stone floor when he landed. It was tender, but he was not hurt badly. Ranger put his paw down and lowered his nose to the ground. The Quintus smell was gone. Ranger stepped out from the shadows and sniffed some more. Nothing. He did not want to go near the trees and the lifting machine again, but that was where the smell was. Carefully, Ranger padded back towards the men and the ropes. He walked slowly, sniffing the gritty stone floor. Finally, there! Ranger followed the Quintus smell up one of the passageways and down another. The smell grew stronger until finally Ranger trotted up to Quintus himself. The young gladiator was crouched in the dark corner, staring out at the activity. Ranger ran up to him and nuzzled his hand. "You found me, dog," Quintus said, reaching up to scratch behind Ranger's ear. Scratches were nice, but not now. There was no time. Quintus had to come back with Ranger to help Marcus. Ranger nudged Quintus's shoulder and barked. "What is it?" Quintus said. Ranger barked again. He took 2 steps back toward the passageway that led to the animal cages and Marcus. He whined and waited for Quintus to get up and come with him. But Quintus shook his head. "I'm not going back. I never should have come here." Ranger didn't understand what Quintus was saying. He only understood that Quintus was not moving, and that was a problem. Ranger barked again and jumped up on Quintus so suddenly that he almost pushed him right over. He barked and nudged and whined and nuzzled. "All right then, dog." Finally, Quintus stood up and followed Ranger down the passageway. Whenever Quintus stopped, Ranger ran around behind him and nudged to him to keep going. They walked around the corner, through the stone doorway, and then another. They were getting closer to Marcus. Ranger could smell him, but Marcus wasn't alone. There were more big cats in the cages that lined the passages. Ranger could tell. He could hear their throaty growls. He could smell their meaty breath. It made Ranger's fur prickle, but he could not turn back. Ranger kept going, even when the men started opening the cages. They prodded the animals out into the passageway and coaxed them onto the lifting machines. Ranger kept his eyes straight ahead, searching. He didn't see Marcus, but he heard him scream. All right. We'll read one more chapter. Chapter 5, Lion on the Loose. "Help, please!" Marcus felt the big cat's claws poking through the thin material of his tunic. It had happened so fast. At first he had lifted the latch to let the lion out of the cage. The creature cowered in the corner. But then the trainer had prodded him with his sharp stick, poking and teasing, urging it to move. And that's when the lion bounded from its cage. The animal trainer jumped out of the way, but Marcus wasn't ready. The lion knocked him to the stone floor. He hit his head on the edge of the stair. When the walls stopped spinning, there was the lion. It had pinned Marcus down with a fat, heavy paw. Marcus whimpered. He didn't dare move. The animal trainer scrambled to his feet, picking up his pointed stick, and crept towards the lion. The beast gave a deep, growling roar. The vibrations echoed in Marcus's chest. He stared at the animal's gaping mouth, its yellow, sharp teeth, with its hungry pink tongue. "Help, please," Marcus whispered. But the animal trainer took a step back. The lion's fierce golden face was so close that Marcus could feel its steaming breath on his cheek. Then Marcus caught a flash of a movement in the passageway. "Quintus," he whispered. Quintus was a gladiator, a new one for certain, but he was brave and strong. Quintus would save him. "Quintus," Marcus whispered. Again, he was scared to make any noise, lest the lion would stop growling and start tearing him apart. "Be still," Quintus said. "Be still, and then—" But Quintus didn't finish his thought. Marcus heard the fear in his voice. Ranger heard it too. He didn't understand this place of fighting and moving trees and strange animals, but he understood fear. Marcus was in trouble. Ranger took a step closer to the lion and barked. A growl deep in his throat, and then he pulled his lips back to show the big cat his teeth. At home, that made Ruggles, the neighborhood cat, run under the porch. But this was not home, and there was no porch. Only a dead-end passageway with hard stone walls, and this cat was not afraid. The lion turned its enormous head and looked at Ranger with its big yellow eyes. It kept Marcus pinned to the damp stone floor. Marcus struggled to breathe. The lion's sharp smell stung his nose. Tears were spilled out from the corners of his eyes. Why had he said that he could handle a lion? How had he imagined controlling this creature of so many times his size? He was weak and foolish and probably about to be eaten. The lion's tail twitched. Ranger barked again. He looked up at Quintus and then took a careful step towards Marcus and the big cat. The lion lifted its paw for Marcus, turned and opened its mouth in a roar that seemed to shake the whole amphitheater. Ranger held his tail high and sniffed. His fur prickled all along his spine. He leaned forward to make himself look as big as he could, and he started barking again and again. The huge cat launched itself at him. Ranger leapt out of the way. He landed on the stone floor and crouched low, growling. The lion lowered its body, too. Its muscles rippled underneath its matted fur. Marcus rolled away from the big cat and struggled to stand up. His chest ached. His legs trembled underneath him, and his knees were almost too weak for him to stand. But Quintus reached out a strong hand and pulled him to his feet. Marcus stumbled to the stone wall. Beside him, the animal trainer raised the sharp stick and took a quiet step toward the lion. Its body was all muscle, low to the ground, ready to explode. But Ranger was ready too. He locked his eyes on the big cat's snarling face, and every hair on his body stood up. The lion let out another thunderous roar and sprang. Ranger jumped to the side just as the animal trainer jabbed the lion with his stick. The huge cat roared and reared to face him. Then 4 men came running with sticks and swords and nets. They snared the big cat and tied it with thick ropes. It was over in an instant, and the men led the lion off to one of the lifting machines. Marcus looked up at Quintus. His voice shook. "Thank you." "I do not deserve your thanks." Quintus looked at the ground. "I did nothing. I was afraid." "But you came back," Marcus said. "The dog brought me." Quintus knelt, and Ranger walked up to them. He let Quintus scratch behind his ear, and then he turned and nuzzled Marcus's hand until the boy began petting his head. It helped Ranger's fur settle down again. Marcus squatted face to face with Ranger. "Thank you, dog. You are the bravest of us all." Ranger didn't understand the boy's words, but he recognized the tone of his voice. It was the same tone that Luke used when Ranger had done his work in search and rescue training. Ranger would find the person he was supposed to find in the woods or the training course, and Luke would say, "Good job, Ranger. Good job, boy." And then he would give Ranger hugs and drink of water, and then they would go home. Home. Ranger looked down at the long stone hallway toward the lifting machine. The lion's roar echoed off the stone. Ranger smelled animal droppings, metal, and fear. Marcus gave Ranger another pat on the head and sighed. Perhaps I am not ready to be a gladiator. I fear I will never be ready, Quintus said quietly. You will, Marcus told him, standing up, but you must go back to the barracks now. Villius will be waiting. You will train, and you will be ready. He paused. You will have to be.